got all the forms, of course. This is Dean Thompson, and I'm again sitting in the den of the Lane home, south of Ketchum. Today is September the 25th, 1984. And this evening, I want to talk with Elnora Seagle a little bit before the Seagles return to Salt Lake City. Have you had a nice visit?
Very.
Good.
Absolutely terrific.
Good.
Wow. I just loved every minute of it. And we saw an old buddy. It's been 40 years.
Who is that?
And the Ross and Dick Anderson.
Uh-huh.
She was a nurse when we were in the old hospital up on the 3rd floor. And Dick worked in the commissary. And the young people met here, and later on they got married, and they were in Salt Lake, but I would have had no idea how to contact them. I found out for 15 years they've been living in California. Mm-hmm. So it was just pure delight to see them. There were so many memories. And
now, how do you spell her first name?
Well, her name is Rosalind, but they called her Ross.
R-O-S-S.
Uh-huh.
Like Ross.
Right.
Well, the reason I wanted to interview you, Elnora, is that, we've been doing a lot of interviews about, the people that worked at Sun Valley, the people that visited Sun Valley. But it has occurred to me there were a group of people who were wives and mothers raising families at Sun Valley. And I was hoping that you and I could talk a little bit about that. What it was like, in your case, to be married to what seems to me to be a dynamo. Was that a dynamo?
Well, he was on 24-hour duty, 7 days a week. Now, if you call that a dynamo, that's what you've got.
I think it qualified, don't you?
That was his job. He was responsible for an entire crew and all the physical properties, plus anything else that happened to come up. And I was by myself a lot.
That's what I wanted to ask you.
I was by myself a very great deal.
What'd you think of that?
Well, I wasn't happy with it all the time. There's no doubt about that. But I coped. And I think most of the women did.
Do you think that
anyone that had, that type of job?
Was that typical, do you think, of someone that worked at Sun Valley?
No, some of the young people, when they got married, had regular hours. I think most of the executive group had a certain amount of free time. I moved down to Ketchum. I think I told you earlier, I lived in Brent's Cabins, and we moved up into the lodge. Then when I was expecting our first child, I moved back down to Brent's Cabins. And then I moved 2 or 3 other places. About 19, he was born in 39, and I moved down then.
No, but I mean, why did you choose to stay at Brent's Cabins rather than at Sun Valley?
I just felt that it was one of those things that would be better for me to do. At that time, I didn't feel that, in my case, and I think Ed definitely felt that having me walk around with my belly sticking out miles would be a particularly good sight for some of our exclusive guests to see.
I see. Interesting.
It was when Nan McCrae was expecting her child, Sandy. Now, she stayed right at the Valley.
Did she?
Yeah.
Now, what was the difference, do you think? Now, that was
attitude,
Winston.
I think.
Winston McCrae's
wife?
wife?
Yeah, Winston McCrae's
wife. What was her name? I'm sorry.
Lillian. Actually, they called her Nin.
N-I-N.
Mm-hmm.
So she stayed at Sun Valley.
Yeah,
and he
stayed up. He was manager.
He was the manager.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed, being an engineer...
Ed was manager of the lodge. McCrae was manager of the lodge. Ed was the chief engineer.
Mm-hmm.
with the result that because it was a 24-hour-a-day job, there were times when he had a room at the inn, he stayed up at the inn a good deal of the time.
And you were down at Brant's?
And I was at Brant's.
Huh. Interesting. So, that really was in deference to, would you say, to the Union Pacific as well as the guests that you decided to do?
Oh, yes.
Did Nin have any problems?
I was told that I should have stayed by Mr. Jeffers' special agent. Said, why didn't you stay up here? And I just felt that it would be better if I was living in town in my own little place where I could do my own little thing.
Uh-huh. Which was?
Which was do my own little thing, wait for the birth of a child.
What did you do for activities or during the day when you were down there waiting?
Oh, I knitted and I crocheted and I read and I walked.
Did you have friends in Ketchum?
And I had friends in Ketchum.
Who were, could anybody
Well,
would know?
you see, I started out in Ketchum, so I knew most of the old people. So,
you knew the locals?
I certainly know the local people very well, and there was no problem at all with my being down in Ketchum and finding things to keep me busy.
You felt comfortable in Ketchum?
Yeah, I wasn't uncomfortable ever.
Uh-huh.
Ever down there. There were some who had difficulty. You know, they just couldn't hack it. And
now some of the personnel,
some of the employees who had husbands who worked a good part of the time, they came in after I did and a little later, and they weren't quite Sun Valley and they weren't quite Ketchum.
Mm-hmm.
You see, they were in the middle. They were kind of lost. And that was not good. That was very bad.
You felt very much at home in Ketchum from the beginning.
Right.
Were there any people that you recall specifically in Ketchum?
Well, I've already talked to you about Audrey Farland. She was, I met her very early. And Helen Griffith, I met very early. I was in the Delphian Society. We organized one here, Helen and I, and several other people. You had to have a group of 12 before they'd even consider setting up a chapter.
What was that? I'm sorry, I don't know.
That was a national organization that was supposed to be very cultural. Mm-hmm. You studied art and you studied interior decorating. You studied jewelry. Well, you just studied everything, literature. Mm-hmm. And it was on a set program, and each year there was a series of subjects that you were supposed to complete, discuss, and write reviews on. Mm. It was like an examination.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So I was in that for 3 years.
Now, Helen Griffith was the wife of the grocer?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I met her daughter this year, Mary Jane.
Mary Jane.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. What about the Berry sisters? Do you?
Oh yes, Agnes and Aunt Kate.
Uh-huh.
They were one of the first people that called on me when I was in Ketchum in 1936.
You remember that visit?
Oh, very well.
Could you tell us about that?
It was just wonderful. They came down to the cabin, and they were dressed in hats and gloves, and were making an official call on me. And I prepared tea. We had tea and a very nice conversation. I was invited to call back, and I did. And we became just excellent friends. Just excellent friends. They were delightful people. We did many things together over the years.
That's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah,
you know, what kind of things would...
Many things were involved in the valley. And the local people, a good percentage of them, were either invited by Mr. Rogers to special parties, special events, invited up for dinner. They were made part of the valley itself. Now that was after Mr. Rogers came. before that, it was very exclusive. And the manager and the general manager were from the East, and it was a place for the ultra-rich people, and they came.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then after Mr. Rogers came, I will say that he immediately involved the rest of the community. And the people that I knew, I attended the Episcopal Church, so I was involved with them. I attended what is now the Presbyterian Church. At that time, it was non-denominational.
Mm-hmm.
My kids went to church in both places.
Mm-hmm.
And I even attended the Catholic Mass with friends of mine who were Catholic at that time.
Very ecumenical.
Yeah, I was, and I am. I am very
wonderful.
ecumenical.
Uh-huh.
My family is ecumenical.
Mm-hmm.
We're a complete mixture.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Now,
during the building period, which not only was 1936 when they were really rushing the lodge through. In 1937 they were building. They built something else in 1938. As I said, like Topsy, it grew.
Mm-hmm.
From year to year, something new was being added. And during the early period, I think Ed's already told you, they had some of the married families lived in outfit cars down on the tracks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those people, being railroad, were people that I also associated with. And they're still, some of them, very my close friends. I still see them.
When you lived at Bald Mountain, the Brants owned it?
Yes.
Did you know the Brants?
Yes. Yes.
Could you tell me anything about them? We haven't, how they were with the community and how the community interacted. I think that's what we're trying to do is paint a picture.
I know what you want to know is really information about some of the people who were originally here in the community.
Is that all you have?
Oh, I have more at home. And
well, we're trying to paint a picture of Ketchum also at the time.
Uh-huh.
And you are one of, I'm assuming, maybe there were more people from Sun Valley and Ketchum at that time. It seems to me you may be one of the few that were.
I was down there most after a number of years, and a lot of the young kids who came up and married moved their families down. You know, Ketchum really didn't have a very good area for people to live because it had been practically a sheep town for so long. All the mining had slowed down. People had left, and it was very small, very quiet community, and there weren't all that many places for young people to rent. So as soon as they could, they bought a lot or bought a little house and fixed it up, such as there were. But that was one of the biggest problems when the Navy was here. There was no place downtown for families to stay that came to visit those Navy boys, really. And there were a few places in Haley that they could use.
Uh-huh.
But it was
a sleepy town.
It had to build up, and eventually it did.
Mm-hmm.
People started buying property, and they started putting up their homes, and what few homes were available for rent, they rented and repaired and did all those things. But basically, it was a small, close-knit community that had lived here for a good many years.
Did you
They had summer business,
Mm-hmm.
That would kind of bring an influx of people in.
Mm-hmm. Did you personally feel isolated?
No. I don't ever feel isolated. I'm lucky. I have never felt in any place, at any time, isolated.
Not even in the bottom of the Grand Canyon?
Not even in the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah,
After that, everything's up,
well,
isn't
you
it?
see, yes.
Oh, that's a terrible pun.
Well, it is. The top is right. 5,000 feet. No.
Hmm.
I think I guess when you learn to live with yourself, there are a good many things that don't affect you much.
Mm-hmm. May
And
I ask you now, you're a mother of three?
three,
Oh, three.
three children.
Did you have any apprehension about carrying a child and birthing a child in this community? Were there any hospitals?
Oh,
Were there any doctors?
The closest hospital was Haley, Dr. Fox's clinic. Now,
Would you like
William
to-
J. Fox.
Would you like
He
to
was a
describe
whiz.
that? He was a whiz?
Oh, he was
Yes.
an absolute whiz as a physician.
Uh-huh.
And he made house calls.
He came up to you in
you better
Ketchum.
believe it. When I was going through a miscarriage, and I called him.
Was this with your first pregnancy?
No, no, with the second. And he came up. At that time, I was living down on the river just across the bridge. I don't know who owns that property now, but it originally used to be the Knight's Cabins.
Okay, right down the road
Right
here.
down the road.
Uh-huh.
And
At McCannville
yeah,
now.
very much by myself, because the Fassets left in the winter. The people who owned the little service station left in the winter. And I was down there by myself in the winter with our eldest. And Ed had to be up at the valley a good deal of the time.
What year was this?
1940, 41 about.
Mm-hmm.
And when I called Dr. Fox, he said, I better come up. He didn't say, try to get down, although I had called
Or take an
Ed
aspirin.
and said I was trouble, or, take an aspirin and go to bed. He said, I better come up. And up he came. And
How
by then,
marvelous.
Ed had gotten there, and he decided it was necessary for me to go to the hospital. And Ed's mother was out visiting at that time, and so she took over the child, and I went down to Haley, and Dr. Fox on slick roads drove 80 miles an hour.
Really? And you didn't have any fear?
No. I don't know why. I think Ed was in hysterics, but I'm sure he just felt that
you had trust in Dr.
Fox was absolutely sure of what he was doing, and there was no traffic. Good grief, he wouldn't be a
What
car
time
at all
of year, what
coming.
month was that?
About February.
Uh-huh. And they can be
About
rough
February,
roads, but they were clear, not much
Yeah.
snow. Could you describe the hospital?
Well, it was on the upper level of the Fox building, and up a steep step, stairs, both front and back, and was very old, and how they kept it in such good condition.
They kept it clean?
And absolutely immaculate. It was worn. Even the linoleum on the floor was worn. There's only a certain amount of money that you have available to fix up a hospital like that. But the equipment was top grade,
And
the
did he
nurses
own
were
that?
excellent. He owned it. He owned
It
it.
was a private hospital then.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And never had a case of staph infection or any other infections. As far as I know, he's saved a great many people's lives.
What about the nurses, the nursing staff there?
His nursing staff consisted of the head nurse, who had been very well trained. Not only did she take a certain amount of nursing training, but she had one heck of a teacher when it came to Dr. Fox.
Do you remember her name?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I can't.
That's okay.
And it only took 3 or 4 nurses at the most, to operate that little hospital and keep, on a changing schedule. There were not many people, really, who were sick between the two two communities.
Mm-hmm. Fairly healthy.
You know, you're talking early here.
Yeah.
You're talking nothing. I couldn't believe what happened in the town. I can't find anything in Ketchum anymore. I'm lucky to know where my closest friends are anymore. Those that are left here.
I would suggest if you have a chance, if you could stop by the Fox building on your way to Salt Lake tomorrow and go through it, it might be a real fun thing for you to do. It has this year just opened anew. And a man by Howard, what's his name? Hughes Brown, has redone it. It might be fun for you to, if you have a chance to go through it. I don't know if you have a chance to do that.
I doubt that I will, but I'll keep that in mind for a future trip.
So, was your first child born there?
Yes, he was born in Haley.
And all your children?
No. Our daughter was born in Haley, 1947. But our youngest son was born at Sun Valley. By then, Dr. Moritz had things set up pretty well so that even in that little hospital up on the 3rd floor that he could handle obstetrics.
And what year was that then?
That was 1949.
So you changed doctors. Dr. Moritz was your doctor then?
I did with Sally. Dr. Moritz did the prenatal, and so I wouldn't have to go back and forth to Dr. Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And they consulted, and then when the child was due to be born, I went down to Dr. Fox for delivery at his hospital.
Interesting. So you had no apprehension about medical care here for your family?
No. I really didn't. I mean, after all, when you stop and think that here is a man out here in this, supposedly by a lot of other people's standards, a primitive area, primitive town, hick people, a lot. That's what they were considered in some places.
Did you consider them that?
No. I knew better.
You knew them?
Well, sure.
It makes a difference.
Well, even if I hadn't known them, they wouldn't have been considered hicks compared to what some of the Eastern people would have felt about it.
Where did Dr. Moritz come from? He was not from here.
Dr. Moritz was from Beatrice, Nebraska.
How did he get here?
He was asked to come out because during the early period, 1937, 1938, I think about 1939, up to that time we had what was considered sort of a resident physician. Retired physicians on the Union Pacific Railroad would come out and, maybe for 6 months, and then they would in turn go back and someone else would come.
They'd be like house doctors?
So it was like house doctors who could handle the headaches and all that stuff. What they hadn't realized was how detrimental this business of broken bones was. I don't think they had even considered that. And when they would have a severe break, a spiral or anything like that, all they could do here was split them and send them down to Dr. Fox,
and he knew what to do.
Who was an excellent orthopedic man. He was an excellent surgeon. He was an excellent psychologist. Well, I'd say psychiatrist, being an MD. He was an excellent friend. Really super if he liked you. If he didn't, he wouldn't have much patience. He was not a patient man with frivolity. With frivolity. And he had graduated from Mayo Clinic. He did a residency at Mayo Clinic. And every 3 months in the summer, he would get a young doctor to come in, take over his practice, and handle the problems with the two communities. Well, for heaven's sakes, communities. Dr. Fox was a doctor for people within 100 square miles.
He really handled the
Oh,
county, didn't he?
yeah, and not only the county, several other counties. And he would go back to Mayo's to brush up on all the newest techniques and information that they had discovered, and all that came back out here to Haley. So it was a funny little old hospital on the second floor. And the paint wasn't peeling because they kept everything like that done. But it looked like a place that the paint should be peeling. Let's put it that way.
All right.
It looked like a place that might just collapse any minute. It wasn't. It was solid.
Good. What about education for your children? Was that a worry for you here?
Well, no, because by the time my children were ready to go to school, we had built an excellent grade school here.
Now, we being whom?
We being
We
the
being
community itself.
Sun Valley or Ketchum or Haley?
Well,
or
it had to be county.
county.
Yeah, it had to be county.
Did you take part in that?
I didn't do much as far as the politics of the county until later.
What'd you
I
do?
was a newcomer. I wasn't allowed, actually, according to the Jack Lane Sheep Commissary Group, which of course we're all sheepmen, you could not become an old-timer in this community until you had lived here 20 years.
Uh-huh.
I was allowed to become an old-timer at the age of 10 years in this community.
That was a real...
Oh, it was a great honor when they decided to grant me that. Oh, this is
Was
really
there a ceremony?
jokey. Oh, no. Oh, no.
But you knew you were part of it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I fit with the community.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't own property. And, you know, when you go on a school bond, you have to be a property owner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
You did buy property, though.
Yes.
When
Yes,
was
we
that
got
then?
these. Oh, goodness, I wouldn't remember what year that was.
Where did you buy?
Well, where the piece of property we did buy is the one that Wynn Gray's real estate office is on.
Oh. Okay, so that was part of the old Brass Ranch also.
Yeah.
You had a home there?
No, we just owned a piece of property there. We never did build a home on it.
When you moved out of Brant's Cottage and you were down here below the bridge, then where did you live? Or did you always live
Well,
down there?
then the war came along and we moved back to the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in what is called the President's Cottage.
That's next to Harriman's?
Next to Harriman's.
Uh-huh.
And we were there all during the war, during the service, and during the time that it was a Navy hospital.
What about having a family with all those Navy people around? Now, how many were there? There were a lot of them.
Well, I always said 1,600 sailors and Marines.
Uh-huh.
And
Did that cause you
that
any
didn't
problem?
count. No. Our house was out of bounds to certain things, particularly when I would complain when I did complain, that there were people coming up and sort of peering in the windows. You know, that was a little scary, some of those things. Then we had a dog who actually was not about to tolerate anything.
Mm-hmm. What kind of dog was that?
He was a Caribou Terrier.
Uh-huh.
He had been given to us by the Fez Taylors, who had in turn been given him by Mr. Barons from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And Fez couldn't keep the dog. Doris was going back to New York to the school. And she couldn't certainly take him, so they asked us to take him. They just brought him up and presented him to us.
Good watchdog.
Tough.
Tough
As
dog.
far as a family.
Uh-huh.
He was excellent with children, but he would not tolerate anything from an adult.
Uh-huh. Now, were your children, any of them in school at this time?
No.
This was all preschool?
No, that was all preschool.
Little ones? Uh-huh.
Preschool.
Entertaining. In your capacity as the wife of the chief engineer, Were you expected to do any entertaining of guests or be involved in any functions at?
Oh, yes, yes.
What would you do?
Well, for one thing, there were times when Mr. Rogers would set up a cocktail party for the guests, and people like Ed and I and Flo Ryder, then um, some of the executive group would act as host and hostess. We were also um, asked to entertain specific people, sometimes by taking them to dinner or seeing that they got to the cocktail parties or down to the Duchin room for dancing, that kind of thing.
Would you entertain in your home?
Yes, but not too many people that were guests. I entertained in my home when I finally got one, which was the apartment. Mostly those people that I knew best. I did not do the huge cocktail party routine for and include